Hello, everyone. Vampire218 here, bringing you my top 18 types of Pokemon in the Pokemon Draft League format. Now, going into the Draft League, I'm very new, and I had looked around a lot to try and find different videos and stats and guides that are going to tell me this type is stronger than this type. I should try and draft more of this type, maybe avoid this type. So in reverse order, I'm going to be going from the weakest to what I believe to be the strongest Pokemon types in the Draft League format. At number 18, I have the Ice type. And this should not be a surprise to anyone. Ice is thought of as one of the weakest types. As you already see, its defense, it only resists itself, and it has 4 weaknesses. It's strong against only 4 types, and of these 4 types, ground, you can hit ground with water or grass, you can hit grass with fire or bug, and you can hit flying with electric or rock. Dragon was its saving grace until the fairy type. So just from typing alone, it's pretty weak compared to other types. And then if we go down to the actual moves, you'll see most of the moves are actually damaging moves with very few actual supporting moves. And that's what Ice is built to be. Ice is built to be more of a glass cannon type of moves. So you have some interesting moves such as Freeze Dry, which is actually super effective against water types. So that's kind of unique. But other than that, a lot of them are just really repetitive with that chance to freeze. I mean, it does have a little bit of priority in Ice Shard, and that's nice, but I mean, other than that, it's really only good status moves are, Mist, which is really nice. If you're going against someone who's going to just keep lowering you, it gets Hail to set up Hail Team, which compared to the other weathers, I just don't think is that strong. And you get Haze, and Haze is probably one of the best Ice supporting moves because it allows you to take on Pokemon who are going to be setting up. Now, I'm not going to be going over specific Pokemon or other moves in this video. That's going to be more of an in-depth analysis of each type, with that one being the Ice. So I'm going to move right down onto number 17. And for number 17, I actually have the Rock type. Now, you may be thinking, the Rock type gets some good moves in, it can set up hazards and stuff, and it has some good mons. But just looking at its actual, typing, it resists only 4 types, one of which is normal, so it doesn't really count. Poison, again, not the most frequent. It does resist flying and fire, which is nice, but, it's not the best thing in the world. When it also has 5 weaknesses, and they're very common weaknesses too. You're going to see a lot of fighting, grass. You're going to see a lot of all of these in the Draft League format. Now, it does have some better offenses than the Ice type in that, it's super effective against flying, fire, and bug. And you're going to see a lot of fire and flying types. And, again, Ice is good against flying, but you're more likely wanting to use a rock move for that. Now, going back down to the actual moves that Rock gets. Rock gets a good amount of damaging moves as well as an okay amount of status moves. It actually gets less, but the status moves it gets are better because it can A, set up hazards through Stealth Rock. It can do Smackdown, which is almost the status in itself by making the Pokemon no longer levitate or have basically flying. It can set up Sandstorm, which is, in my opinion, one of the best weathers when you combine it with other things. It can boost its speed by 2 stages, and that's basically an agility right there. Now, one of the problems is that you'll see a lot of these are physical, and that can be an issue because you may go up against a physical wall, a physical defensive flying type, a defensive whatever, and then you have an issue. As you see, there's like 2 really okay Rock special type moves. So that's why Rock type I have at number 17. It's got some good coverage, but the mons that get these moves are far and in between. At number 16, I have the Bug type. And you may be thinking, well, if we're going strictly on, typings, this isn't that good. It may be weak to only 3 types, and it resists 3 types, so that's pretty good. It's strong against Dark, Grass, and Psychic, and those are all very common types. However, it's weak against like 8 different types, and the types that it's weak against are really common. But that's not why Bug is on here at number 16. Bug is on here so high because Bug gets a lot of good status moves. It gets Spider Web, which means that now your opponent can't switch out. It gets Sticky Web, which means when they enter, their speed is lowered. It gets good utility in things like U-Turn, Quiver Dance. There's just so many good utility Bug moves that it is always good to have a Mon that can at least learn those. Moving up to number 15, I have the Flying type, and this is where it really you start to see it turn around, because as you see the defensives, you have it being immune to ground, and that's really good. Finding Pokemon whose types grant them immunities in this format is very good, because it allows free switch-ins. If you know they're going to use a ground type move like Earthquake, you can switch in your Flying type, and it's essentially a free switch. It has 3 resistances, of which are pretty good typings, except for really Bug, which you don't see as often. And it's weak to 3 types. Now that's kind of shitty, but at least it's not weak to more. It's also weak against 3 types, 2 of which are the ones that it's weak to, but that's not too uncommon, and you can usually get good coverage to deal with those. And it's also strong against the same types that it resists. And these are pretty common in fighting in grass. Bug, not so much, as there's other moves it's weak to. But as we go down and we look at the actual moves that you get, it gets some really good moves. It has a good variety of physical and special, which is what we really like in a type. You want to have that variety. You want to be able to build a special flyer or a physical flyer to deal with different types of tanks. You'll see that it gets healing in the form of Roost. It can set up essentially self-status in terms of doubling the speed of your team for 4 turns. That's really good. It can get Feather Dance to lower the opponent's stats. It can remove hazards with Defog. And it also gets some good extra effects in high critical rate and flinching through the Air Slash. At number 14, I actually have the Ghosts type. And this is going to be really odd because it has 2 immunities, it has 2 resistances, and it has only 2 weaknesses. Going back in, it's not effective, though, against normal types. It's weak against dark types, and it's only strong against 2 types. And this is really why I have dark being so low, being at number 14. It's a great type for the typings, but because it isn't effective against 1, and it's only really effective against 2, it's not that good. Now we go into the typings. It's a very utility-based typing. It gets good moves like Destiny Bond. It gets Curse. It gets a good variety of special and physical splits. But if you actually look, there are very few Ghost-type moves. And of those, a lot of them aren't really usable. You're not going to be using Astonish in the league. You're not going to be using Lick. Nightmare is only going to go if you're going against with a sleep team. You probably won't see Spiked or Trick or Treat. So that's, again, one of the reasons why it's so low, being number 14 on my list, is just because it has such low variety in the actual moves that you want to use. It's got good move coverage. You get the physical and the special type moves. But within that, there's only 2 or 3 of each you want. And it does get good. You can get that confuse ray to confuse them, and it has the 100% accuracy, so that's good. But there's no real other statuses you're seeing here, and I think that's a major issue. Moving up to number 13, I have the Normal type. And it's actually a very weird type to see above Ghost, and to see in such a high position relatively. The reason why I have Normal type is they get great coverage in Normal types. They usually learn a variety of moves. They're only weak to 1 type, they have an immunity, and they're only weak against 2 types. Combining that with the utility and the coverage that they get. Now, going down to the actual moves of normal types, they're really nothing to, to talk home about. You get some interesting utility like Belly Drum and Baton Pass, but this type of move is not what you're using. You're picking up a normal type Mon, and you're putting other types of moves on it. You know, Extreme Speed is again one of those moves you like to see, and so is Fake Out. But again, normal types usually have higher stats, and they are better at having coverage for different types of Pokemon that you'll encounter. Moving all the way up to number 12, I have the Fighting type. Now, looking at this right now, you'll think, well, that's really weird. It's weak against 5 types, it's strong against 5 types, it has no effect against Ghost, it only has 3 resistances, and is weak to 3 types. But very similar to other Pokemon types that have been on this list, it has a good move pool. You'll see already a lot of these are physical, and that is one of its weaknesses, and if not for that, I think it would be much higher on the list. You'll also see it gets very little status type moves. The very few it gets are things like Quick Guard, which is essentially Protect. It gets Detect, which is essentially Protect. And it gets Bulk Up to raise its attack and defense by 1 stage. That being said, the Fighting type Pokemon usually will get a different amount of these types of moves. And you have utility in moves like Counter. You have moves like Dynamic Punch, which will confuse the target. Drain Punch, which will heal you. You have priority in Mach Punch and Vacuum Wave. And you have multiple hitting moves like Triple Kick. And I believe Arm Thrust. So, Fighting type is a very good type to bring. Also, it is a type that deals with Steel types. And you're going to see a lot more of this when we move up in the list. Steel types are very good tank types, and when a type can take care of that, it's a pretty good type. Moving up to number 11, I have the Psychic type. And you'll see it's very similar to Ghost in that, you know, it has very few resistances and weaknesses, and it's not really strong against too much. But Psychic type plays like a very tricky type. You'll see it has a variety of different status type moves. Moves that will increase your stats, moves that will mess with your opponent, moves that will make an opponent take damage later. It has moves like Gravity, it has Heal Block to prevent healing, Healing Wish to heal a Pokemon, it can induce Sleep. Psychic is a very tricky type to play against and one of the best utility types in the format. If you need a Mon to help support the rest of your team, I highly suggest picking up a type that can support these moves. Moving up to number 10, I actually have the Poison type. And this is really odd because it doesn't really fit in with what you're going to be seeing next, other than Poison types can absorb toxic spikes. Saying that, it also is able to set toxic spikes in reference to its hazard setting. But before we get into the moves, we're just going to go into, you know, it has a good amount of resistances. It's only weak to 2 types. Now, that's very good defensively. It isn't effective against Steel at all, which kind of sucks. It is weak against 4 types and is only strong against 2 types. But as we go down, we'll see that it has a status attributed to it in Poison. And I think one of the best statuses in the game is Toxic, which badly poisons the foe, meaning they lose more and more each turn. Now, this is really good for different stall tactics and various different types of Pokemon that you might want to bring. Aside from actually poisoning your opponent, there's not the best utility in this type, and we do see a good physical special split in the typing itself, so you could run a good physical attacking poison type or special attacking poison type, but you won't see too many supporting poison moves that don't just try and poison the opponent through things like Poison Powder or Toxic. Moving up the list again, I have Dark type at number 9. Now, if we thought Psychic was a type that was very tricky, Dark type is Psychic on steroids. Dark is immune to Psychic types. It resists both Dark and Ghost. and it has only 3 weaknesses in Bug Fairy and Fighting. You know, it's weak against 3 types. That doesn't really matter. You're not really going for the, damage here. And again, it's strong against 2. You're not really going for the damage. You're going for those extra effects that Dark-type moves have, and there's a lot of them. Just to point out some moves of interest, Knockoff, may only have a 65 power, but if they have an item that is removable, its power is at 1.5 times, and it removes their item. That's unreal. Not only do you now deal with one of their best items, take off their leftovers, take off their band, you also deal damage. That's unreal. You have Foul Play. If you want to run a pure tank dark type that can do that, you don't need to have an attack stat, because they'll have an attack stat. You can throw your own items. You get essentially swagger for special attack. You get possible flinching. You get a good special physical split. You have a great amount of status types through moves like Quash, which forces the target to move last. It's not really the best. You get Taunt, meaning they can't use status moves for 3 turns. It's really good type, and I think that all draft teams should have a dark type. Moving up to number 8, I have the ground type. Now, the ground type's up here so high because it's immune to electric. You will see a lot of volt switches in this type of format, and you need to be able to stop that. You need to be able to break that momentum. So similar before when I had flying so low, well, you don't really see too many flying moves, too many ground moves that you need to disrupt. You're just disrupting momentum there. Whereas here, you're actually stopping them from doing something they need. You're not only stopping the damage, you're stopping that switch. So you are now 2 moves ahead of them. It's strong against quite a few types. Again, one of them being steel, and that's really nice. It's pretty good defensively. It only has 3 weaknesses, and it resists 2 types. That's not really anything. It is, again, not effective against flying, but whatever. As we go down, you see that it does get a hazard in regards to spikes, and spikes can be good. They're not, I don't think, as good as rocks, just because it takes more time to set them up. Other than that, it's a lot of just physical moves with the odd special move here and there. That is why I have ground being number 8 on this list. For number 7, I have the electric type. The electric type has only 1 weakness, and that is one of the best types for defensively we've seen so far. In addition, electric types have one of the highest speeds of all types of Pokemon. It has 3 resistances, which is really nice. It is only weak against 3 types. It is strong against 2 types, and again, it's not effective against ground types, but it's, I think, still better. It has a good amount of physical special splitting with some good physical moves, some good special moves. It has a status associated with it in the terms of paralysis. You get Thunder Wave to get paralysis. You get Nuzzle to get paralysis. And it's just a good type if you want to be Volt switching, so you get that with a U-turn combo going. You build momentum. And it's just a very good type. It has very hard-hitting moves such as Bolt Strike. It can up its own stats. It has different moves like Fusion Bolt, which hits pretty good. And it can actually remove its ground weakness with Magnet Rise, which is something you don't really see too much in the League format. You don't really see types being able to remove their own weaknesses. Now we're getting up to the top 6, and you're going to see a pretty recurring theme here. At number 6, I have the Fire type, and you'll see, wow, those are some really good defenses. It resists 6 types. It's only weak to 3 types. It's good against 4 types, and it's weak against 4 types. The problem with that, though, is, as you see here, Fire really wants to go in a either special or physical attacking type Pokemon. You won't see too many utility type Fire types. Now, I have Fire in this slot because you will want a Fire type on your draft. You want to form a strong Grass, Fire, Water core. And you want to do that because if you look here, it resists both Fire and Grass. So that means if you have a fire, water, grass core, you can do some strategic switch-ins and soak damage easier than if you didn't. Going back down here, some of these moves to mention are Overheat, which is extremely powerful, Sacred Fire, which has a 50% chance to burn, and Will-O-Wisp being one of its few utility type moves that actually just outright burns the target if it hits. Another point to mention is Sunny Day for those sun teams. However, outside of that, you're going to probably be seeing a attacking version of a fire type. Moving up to number 5, I have water types. Now, you're going to want a bulky water type. As you see, it has 4 resistances, only 2 weaknesses, strong against 3 types, and weak against 3 types. However, water is known for its bulk. You have strong Pokemon in the water type that are just bulky and are able to take hits, such as Slowbro, such as Swampert, such as Tentacruel. These mons, they like taking hits. Now, water has good moves, it has priority, it can get some healing, and it has heavy hitting moves. Now, that being said, it also has Rain Dance, but it has the same problem the fire has. You know, you want to go tanking, but you're not really going to be going with water moves to tank other than maybe Aqua Ring. You're going to be having to dip into other moves. Now, on the offensive side, it has some very good offensive moves, such as Steam Eruption, which has a 30% chance to burn, and Scald, which is just a slightly less powerful version of it. It has Whirlpool, which will trap the opponent, and a few other notable utility moves, such as Brine and, its priority Aqua Jet. Also, Waterfall, having that 20% chance to flinch, is really good on a physical water type. Other than that, though, water suffers a kind of the same issue we've seen with a lot of types up till now, that they're either physical or special. And water has that issue where it's mainly special. Moving up to number 4, I have the grass type. And, you'll see grass is weak against 7 types. It only is strong against 3 types. It resists 4 types, and it's weak to 5 types. So you won't be seeing a grass tank. However, if we move down to the moves, you'll see that grass has a great amount of status. It can do moves like Sleep Powder to put your opponent to sleep, Stun Spore to paralyze your opponent, Synthesis to heal itself, Spore to sleep your opponent. It can use Leech Seed to get health back, Mega Drain to get health back, Ingrain to get health back. You're going to be wanting to run a utility grass type. This will not only support your team by using moves like Aromatherapy to remove statuses, but it's also just a good type to have. It forms your grass, fire, water core. Its resistances are really good in that it resists both electric, grass, and water. Ground we're not worrying about because you probably have a flying type. But it's just a very good type to have because you could also run it as an offense. It gets good offensive moves. It gets Leaf Blade. It gets Leaf Storm. There are good moves in grass, so you can run it in more than one way. And that's why I have grass as being number 4. Up in number 3, we're starting to set the stage for the last core, the Fairy Dragon Steel Core. And as we'll see, I have Fairy at number 3. I have Fairy at number 3 because it just hasn't been expanded enough yet. We just got the Fairy type a few years ago, and it just doesn't have the support there yet. There are so few Fairy type moves. It's not the best typing. It has the immunity to Dragon, and that's great. But Dragons get better coverage than just Dragon. They can use Electric. They can use Fire. So you're really not getting anything on the defensive side. It resists Bug, Dark, and Fighting, and that's pretty nice. It's weak to only Poison and Steel, and that's very nice. And it is strong against Dark, Dragon, and Fighting. Now, for Fighting types, you're going to have that Psychic move or that Flying move. For Dark types, you're probably going to have either a Bug move or a Fighting move, And for Dragon, that's really why Fairy is up here at so high, is because it forms that core and is effective against Dragon. Combining that with, they put the Fairy type on some very good Pokemon. Fairy can be utility, it can be tanky, or it can hit hard. And I think they really tried to force that with the Fairy type. So as we'll see here, Fairy gets a lot of status. The only problem is the status it really isn't that good. You know, it lowers the attack, or it will, you know, the Pokemon can't flee, which is useless. It's not that good. It also suffers from that special physical problem, where, you know, the best moves are special. One point to note, however, is that it gets Geomancy. Now, while only two Mons in that Smeargle and Xerneas can get this move, it's a very good move if you combine that with the herb. Moving up to number 2, I have the Dragon type. Now, looking at the Dragon type, it should be very clear why I have the Dragon type so high. It has 4 resistances. It resists the entirety of the Fire Water Grass core, as well as resisting Electric, and that's really good to resist those elemental types. It's weak against itself, which, well, you're going to be running a dragon to counter a dragon. It's weak against Fairy, which we've already seen. There's very few, you know, good Fairy type moves. And it's weak against Ice. And, you know, as I've already said, Ice is just not a strong enough type. It's not strong against anything but itself. However, dragons get good coverage. So you're not going to be wanting to run these moves. These moves, you know, there's not very many of them. They have some good utility in things like Dragon Tail or Outrage, just hitting really hard. But what you're wanting to use a Dragon type for is to cover other types of moves. You know, you want to be running a bulky dragon that's going to also hit hard. And at number 1, I have the Steel type. And I mean, just looking at those defensive effects, you can't say that Steel is not the best defensive type. You know, it has 10 resistances, it's only weak to 3 types, and it has an immunity. That's just unreal. It's weak against 4 types, whatever. It's strong against 3 types. Who even cares about that? When you have 10 resistances and an immunity, you are one of the best types. You are a great switch into when they're going to use, you know, any of these types. Heck, any type in general. I mean, it's just so good. Now, Steel type moves, it's similar to the Dragon Fairy problem. There's not, you know, nothing really of interest here. You don't really care. You know, it has some good moves like Gyro Ball if you're running a really slow Steel type, which you'll see a lot of. It has priority in Bullet Punch, but you're running a Steel type to take those hits. You're generally going to get good coverage from other types of moves, and that's what you're going to want to run. You know, that's what I think the Steel type is good at. It's good at taking that switch in, taking that damage, and then just being a threat, because you could be running a Water type move or a Fire type move, and one of those could mean certain death for your opponent, and one of those could mean not, and they won't know which one you're running. Anyway, I've been Vampire218 with my brief Pokemon analysis of the types in the Draft League format. If you liked the video, please remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more Pokemon Draft League format content. Thank you. Bye.